Chapter 1. I did not find out my family wanted me gone through a conversation. I found out because my 8-year-old daughter woke me up before sunrise, holding a note she found on the kitchen table, asking me if she had done something wrong. The note said they were on vacation in Hawaii and that we needed to move out before they came back. No explanation, no goodbye. That morning was not the first time my family chose themselves over me, but it was the first time my child paid the price for it. I am Claire, a single mother who spent years holding my family together until the day I stopped helping and everything they relied on began to fall apart. It was still dark outside when my daughter shook my shoulder, not the gentle kind of waking up, but the stiff, nervous kind, like she had been standing there for a while deciding whether it was safe to touch me. I remember thinking it had to be too early. The house felt wrong in that way it only does before sunrise, quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. "Mom," she said softly, "I need you to look at something." I pushed myself up on one elbow and saw her standing beside my bed in her pajamas, hair sticking out at odd angles, eyes wide and shiny. She was clutching a folded piece of paper in both hands, squeezing it so tight the edges were bent and soft. "What is it, honey?" I asked, already scanning her face the way mothers do, checking for blood, checking for tears, checking for the kind of panic that comes with bad dreams. She held the paper out like it might hurt her if she kept it too close. "I found this on the kitchen table. I think it is from Grandma." Something in her voice made my stomach tighten before I even touched the paper. I took it from her and unfolded it slowly. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I could already feel that whatever was written there had changed the shape of the morning. The note was short. There was no greeting, no explanation, no signature. "We are in Hawaii. Please move out before we get back." That was it. I stared at the words for a few seconds longer than made sense, like if I looked hard enough they might rearrange themselves into something kinder. They did not. I felt that hollow drop in my chest, the one that starts just below your ribs and spreads out cold and heavy. It was not anger. Not yet. It was the kind of shock that makes everything go very quiet inside. I looked down at my daughter. She was watching my face with the careful attention of a child who knows something is wrong, but does not yet know how bad. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "No." I said it too quickly. I heard myself do it. "No, sweetheart. This is not because of you." She nodded, but her hands were shaking now, fingers twisting into the sleeves of her pajama top. She believed me the way children believe the adults they love, even when their bodies are telling them something else. I told her to stay in my room for a minute while I checked something. She climbed onto my bed and sat there very still, like she was afraid that moving would make things worse. The floor was cold when I stepped into the hallway. The house felt emptier than it should have. Not just quiet, but cleared out like the air itself had been disturbed. I went straight to the front door. Yesterday, there had been suitcases lined up against the wall. My parents had talked about sunscreen and flights and how early they needed to leave. I remembered my mother asking if I could make sure the trash went out while they were gone, said in that cheerful tone that made it sound like a favor instead of an expectation. The space by the door was empty. No bags, no jackets, no shoes kicked off in a hurry. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. The driveway was bare. My parents' car was gone. I stood there for a moment staring at the concrete like the car might suddenly reappear if I waited long enough. It did not. I took out my phone and called my mother. It rang until it went to voicemail. I called my father next. Voicemail again. I tried once more because denial is a stubborn thing and it costs nothing to try. Nothing. When I went back into my bedroom, my daughter looked up at me immediately. "Are they here?" she asked. "Not right now," I said. Her mouth tightened and her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, trying very hard not to cry. I sat down beside her and pulled her into my arms. She leaned into me like she had been holding herself upright by willpower alone. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "Did they want us to leave because of me?" My throat burned. I hugged her tighter, one hand pressed against the back of her head, feeling the warmth of her hair against my palm. "No," I said again, slower this time. "We are not in trouble. None of this is your fault." She did not argue, but she did not relax either. Children know when adults are lying to protect them. They may accept it, but their bodies remember. I kissed the top of her head and told her we were going to be okay. I said it because it was what she needed to hear, and because saying it out loud made it feel a little more possible. After she settled back onto the bed, I walked through the house again, slower this time. The kitchen was clean, too clean, no coffee mug in the sink, no note reminding me to water the plants. Just that single piece of paper left where anyone walking through the room would see it, left where a child would see it. That was the moment something shifted. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not an argument that got out of hand. It was a decision that had been made in advance, written down, and carried out without a single conversation. They had chosen to leave. They had chosen how to tell me, and they had chosen not to care who found the message first. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. My daughter had curled up on her side knees, tucked in, eyes open but unfocused. I brushed her hair back from her face and told her to try to rest. She nodded and closed her eyes, but her breathing stayed shallow, like she was listening for something. As I watched her, a thought kept repeating itself in my head, steady and unwelcome. This was not about today. This was not about Hawaii. This was about something that had been building quietly for a long time, something I had learned to live with because it felt easier than naming it. I stayed there until my daughter finally drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. The house remained silent around us, holding the absence of the people who had left without looking back. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat there listening to my child breathe, and for the first time I let myself consider that maybe the problem was not what had just happened. Maybe the problem was everything that had come before it. Chapter 2. Memory does not come back to me in neat chapters. It returns in patterns, the same shapes repeating themselves over years until you stop noticing them. Sitting there beside my sleeping daughter, I realized I had been walking inside one pattern for most of my adult life. I had always been the one who adjusted. When something needed to be handled, it somehow became my responsibility without anyone ever asking. If a bill was due, my mother would mention it casually over dinner already, assuming I would take care of it. If my father needed a ride to an appointment, my schedule was the flexible one. If the house needed watching errands, needed running plans, needed fixing, I was the answer. No one ever said it outright. It was simply understood. My younger sister Natalie grew up in the same house but not in the same role. Where I was expected to adapt, she was expected to be supported. Where I learned to manage disappointment quietly, she learned that her feelings mattered and should be accommodated. Growing up, I told myself that was normal. Older siblings help. Older siblings understand. That was the story I repeated until it sounded like truth. When Natalie talked about her dreams, the room shifted toward her. When I spoke about mine, the conversation drifted elsewhere. Not in a cruel way, just enough to make it clear which plans were important. "She needed help," my mother would say. "She has so much potential. I was told I was capable." Strong, independent. Those words sound like compliments until you realize they are often used to excuse neglect. By the time I reached my late 20s, the pattern had settled into something solid. I had built a stable life, married young, worked hard, and tried to make something that felt safe. When my marriage ended in 2018, I did not move back home immediately. I rented a small apartment in Cedar Grove close to my job and Lily's preschool, and for the first time in a long while, life felt quiet in a good way. It was not glamorous. The walls were thin and the kitchen was cramped, but it was ours. Lily and I ate dinner on the couch and made up bedtime routines that belonged only to us. I learned how peaceful it felt to live without waiting for someone to need something from me. That peace lasted a little over 2 years. In early 2021, my parents started calling more often. The tone was gentle, concerned, almost flattering. Natalie had been accepted into a graduate program out of state. It was a good school. Expensive. My mother talked about how hard it would be for her to manage on her own. My father worried out loud about loans and stress, and whether Natalie would have to work too much and lose focus. They asked how Lily and I were doing. They mentioned how nice it would be to have us closer again. It was never framed as pressure. It was framed as family needing each other. When I hesitated, my mother reminded me how much money I would save on rent. She said they would help with Lily. She said it would only be for a little while, just until Natalie was settled. I remember standing in my kitchen after that call, looking at Lily coloring at the table and feeling that familiar pull. The one that told me helping was the right thing to do. The one that told me saying no would make me selfish. So we moved back. At first it was fine. The house was big enough. Lily had her own room. My parents were polite, even helpful. Natalie was grateful in the abstract way people are when they believe support is owed to them. I took over groceries. I paid utilities without being asked. When Natalie's tuition bills started coming in, I put my card information into the school payment portal to cover what her loans did not. It was a structured payment plan, spread out monthly, manageable with my salary. No contracts between us. No promises. Just me doing what I had always done. Whenever I asked how long this arrangement would last, my mother would wave it off. "We will figure it out," she said. "Family does not keep score." That should have been my warning. As months passed, the tone shifted. Small comments slipped in. Jokes about me still living at home. Remarks about how nice it must be to have so much support. My contributions faded into the background, invisible, because they were consistent. Natalie never saw the payment confirmations. She never saw the numbers. She only knew that her classes were covered and her life was moving forward. If I brought up money, I was told not to be dramatic. If I mentioned feeling overwhelmed, I was reminded that Natalie was under more pressure than I was. I learned when to stop talking. Looking back, I can see how carefully I was trained. Praise when I stayed quiet. Discomfort when I pushed back. Approval tied to compliance. Hawaii was not the betrayal. It was the moment the mask slipped. The note on the table was not an accident. It was simply the first time they stopped pretending my presence was valued rather than tolerated. Sitting there beside Lily, watching her sleep with her brow slightly furrowed, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel before. Anger, yes, but more than that, clarity. If I continued the way I had been, my daughter would learn the same lesson I had, that love was conditional, that being useful mattered more than being respected, that silence was safer than honesty. I smoothed her hair back from her face and felt a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the morning shock and everything to do with the years leading up to it. I had thought I was protecting her by keeping the peace. Now I understood that peace built on my silence was not peace at all. Chapter 3. The understanding settled into me quietly, the way decisions do when they have already been made somewhere deeper than words. That morning, I packed a small overnight bag for my daughter and told her we were going to stay with a friend for a bit. I kept my voice light. I did not explain more than she needed. She watched me from the doorway of her room, hugging her stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Are we going to Grandma's later?" she asked. "No," I said gently. "We are going to Aunt Bethany's house." Her shoulders relaxed a little at that. Bethany Cruz was one of the few people in my life who never asked me to explain myself. She was also someone my parents had never quite known how to manipulate, which made her feel safer than most places. The drive over was quiet. Nora stared out the window, counting mailboxes, her small hand resting on the center console, like she needed to make sure I was still there. When we pulled into Bethany's driveway, she opened the door before I could even knock. "You okay?" she asked, eyes flicking to Nora and back to me. Yes, I said. It was the most honest answer I could give in that moment. She stepped aside to let us in. Go play with Leo, she said to Nora. He's in the living room. My daughter hesitated, then padded off down the hall. I waited until I heard the sound of children talking before I let myself exhale. Bethany leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. Want coffee? She asked. Yes, I said. Please. She handed me a mug and waited. She always waited. I'm not here to vent, I said finally. I just needed somewhere safe for her. Bethany nodded once. That's enough, she said. After I made sure Nora was settled, I pulled my laptop from my bag and sat at the kitchen table. The surface was scratched and familiar, covered in the normal clutter of someone else's life. It felt grounding. I logged into my bank account first. Nothing dramatic, just numbers and dates and transactions lined up neatly, each one a record of choices I had made without ever being asked. Then I opened the university portal. Northlake University's payment page loaded slowly like it always did. Allison's name was there at the top. My card information was saved, a convenience I had set up years ago, when things felt temporary and helpful. I hovered my cursor over the remove option. For a moment, I thought about my sister. About how she had never once asked me if paying her tuition was hard. About how she talked about her future as if it existed in a vacuum untouched by the people holding it up. I thought about Nora sleeping with her forehead wrinkled in worry. That was the end of the hesitation. I clicked. The screen refreshed. A confirmation message appeared. An email arrived seconds later, polite and neutral, informing me that my payment method had been removed. No alarms, no accusations, just a system acknowledging a change. Next, I opened the travel booking. The trip was to Kauai this time. My parents had been excited about it, talking about beaches and sunsets, asking me to keep an eye on the house while they were gone. My name was attached to part of the reservation. I selected my portion and canceled it. Another confirmation, another email. I closed my laptop and wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, letting the heat seep into my palms. Bethany sat across from me, watching my face. You good? She asked. I think so, I said. She tilted her head. You look calm. I am? I said, surprised to find it was true. Nora ran back into the kitchen a little later, cheeks flushed. Can I have some juice? She asked. Of course, I said, standing up to pour it for her. She took the cup with both hands. Are we going back home tonight? She asked. I crouched in front of her so we were eye level. Not tonight, I said. We're going to stay somewhere else for a little while. She considered that. Just us? She asked. Yes, I said. She nodded like that made sense. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother popped up on the screen. We need to talk. I set the phone face down on the table. The calls started an hour later, one from my father, then my sister. I did not answer. Bethany raised an eyebrow. Want me to take her to the park? She asked quietly. That would help, I said. When the house was empty again, I checked my voicemail. My mother's voice was tight-clipped. There's an issue with Allison's tuition payment. Call me back. My sister's message came next. What did you do? My account says something changed. I did not return either call. That evening, after Nora fell asleep on Bethany's couch, I opened my email again. There were more notifications now. Automated, informational. Exactly what I expected. The consequences were beginning to exist, but they were still abstract. Numbers, notices, deadlines. Nothing explosive yet. The next morning, I met with a property manager on the other side of town. The apartment was small, one bedroom plus a converted space that could fit a child's bed and dresser. The carpet was worn, the walls a neutral beige that felt more practical than inspiring, but the windows let in light. This one is available immediately, the manager said. I walked through the space, slowly imagining where Nora's things would go, where I would put the table, how quiet it would be at night. "Can we apply today?" I asked. She smiled. Of course. The paperwork was straightforward. Proof of income. Identification. A deposit. All things I could handle on my own. When she slid the keys across the desk a few days later, they were cool and heavy in my hand. I sat in my car for a moment afterward, keys resting in my palm, and thought about how little noise it had taken to change everything. I had not yelled, I had not begged, I had simply stopped participating. That night, I unlocked the door to our new place for the first time. The empty rooms echoed softly as I walked through them. I set my bag down and leaned against the wall, listening. It was not silence the way my parents' house had been silent. This was different. This was space. Chapter 4. The space stayed quiet for only a few hours. The first sign that something had shifted came through my phone, a low vibration against the kitchen counter, while I was unpacking a box of dishes. I ignored it. Then it vibrated again. And again. By the time I checked it, there were 6 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 1 from my sister. I set the phone back down and kept unpacking. It was not that I did not hear them. It was that I finally understood I did not have to respond on their schedule. An hour later, the messages started coming in. "There's a problem with the tuition account. Call me as soon as you get this. This is urgent." I read them without replying. That evening, my sister called again. I answered that one. "What did you do?" she asked, the second I said hello. Her voice was sharp, already blaming, already certain there had been a mistake that needed correcting. "I removed my card," I said. There was a pause, then a short laugh that did not sound amused. "You cannot just do that," she said. "My account is on hold. I cannot register for next term." "I did," I said. "And I can." "You are doing this to punish me," she said. "This is because you are mad." "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am not paying any more." "You promised," she snapped. "I never promised," I said. "I helped." "Those are not the same thing." She inhaled sharply. "You are ruining my life," she said. I closed my eyes for a moment. "No," I said. "I am stepping out of it." She hung up. The next morning, my mother called. I could hear it in her voice before she even said my name. The careful politeness, the forced calm. "There has been a misunderstanding," she said. "The university says your payment method was removed." "That is correct," I said. "Well, you need to fix it," she said, as if the problem were a technical error. "Allison cannot be dealing with this right now." "I am not fixing it," I said. Her voice tightened. "You cannot just decide something like this without talking to us. I did talk," I said. "For years." "That is not fair," she said. "This is about family." "I know," I said. "That is why I am done." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father and I are coming by later." They did not ask. They arrived that afternoon, both of them standing on the small concrete walkway outside my new apartment, looking around like they were trying to place me inside this version of my life. My mother went straight to the point. "You have created a serious problem," she said. "Allison's enrollment is at risk." "I understand," I said. My father cleared his throat. "We just need you to put the card back on," he said. "This is not the time to make a statement." I shook my head. "I am not doing that." My mother's mouth tightened. "You are being dramatic," she said. "I am being clear," I said. She exhaled sharply. "This is not just about tuition," she said. "There are other things we need to discuss." That was when she pulled the folder from her bag. It was thick. Too thick for anything simple. She opened it and slid a set of papers toward me. "We are refinancing the house," she said. "The payments are about to go up and the bank needs your signature." I looked down at the documents. My name was there, printed neatly alongside theirs. I remembered signing those papers years ago when I still believed helping meant being included. You already agreed to help us, she said. This is just paperwork. No, I said. This is a loan agreement. My father frowned. It is nothing new, he said. You have always been on it, and I am not signing anything else, I said. My sister had arrived without me noticing. She stood near the door, arms crossed. You cannot do this, she said. If you do not sign, the bank will not approve it. I know, I said. My mother's voice sharpened. Do you want us to lose the house? I met her eyes. You left a note telling us to move out, I said. You made that decision without asking if we had anywhere to go. That is different, she said quickly. This is about everyone. This is about the same thing I said. You assumed I would fix it. My father tried a softer approach. We are family, he said. We take care of each other. I nodded. I am taking care of my child, I said. Silence settled over the room. My sister stepped forward. You are doing this out of spite, she said. I shook my head. I am doing this because I finally understand what my name is worth, I said. And I am not lending it out anymore. My mother looked at the papers again, then back at me. So, you are just saying no, she said. Yes, I said. She stared at me for a long moment like she was waiting for me to add something, an explanation, an apology. I did not. Finally, she gathered the papers back into the folder and stood up. You are making a mistake, she said. Maybe I said, but it is mine. They left without another word. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to their footsteps fade down the walkway. There was no celebration, no victory speech, just the quiet understanding that something fundamental had changed. They had built their plans around my participation. And now that I had stepped away, the structure was already starting to show its cracks. I walked back into the living room and looked around at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked. The old order had depended on my silence. Without it, there was nothing left to hold it together. Chapter 5. The months that followed did not arrive with drama. They arrived quietly, one ordinary day after another, until I realized the calm was not temporary. My name is Claire Benton now, at least in this version of my life. My daughter is named Ava. She is 8 years old and she sleeps through the night. That alone still feels unreal sometimes. Our apartment sits above a small bakery on the edge of a residential street in northern Oregon. The windows face east, and in the mornings the light comes in soft and steady. It is not a big place. The floors creak. The bathroom fan rattles if you leave it on too long. But it is ours. I am not richer than I was before. In fact, the budget is tighter. I cook more. I think before I buy things. I work a few extra hours when I can. But I am not exhausted in the same way. Ava used to wake up at night and wander into my room without saying anything. She would just stand there waiting like she needed permission to exist. I would pull her into bed and hold her until she fell asleep again, listening to her breathing stay shallow long after her body had relaxed. Now she sleeps sprawled across her mattress limbs everywhere, hair fanned out like she has nothing to guard against. One night a few weeks ago, she climbed into my bed after a thunderstorm. She pressed her cheek against my shoulder and sighed. I waited for the question, the one she used to ask all the time. Am I in trouble? It never came. Instead, she said, "It is loud tonight." I know, I said, but it is okay, she added, already drifting off. I lay there listening to the rain, feeling something loosen inside my chest. The quiet did not mean nothing was happening. It meant I was no longer the center pole holding everything upright. My parents still existed. My sister still existed. They did not vanish. They simply stopped being part of my daily decisions. At first, the messages came regularly. Updates I did not ask for. Complaints disguised as concern. Your father is very stressed. Allison is having a hard time. We did not expect things to turn out like this. I responded less and less, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to explain. I learned something unexpected in those months. When you stop feeding a system, it does not collapse dramatically. It shrinks. It rearranges itself. It looks for new supports. They found other solutions, not easier ones, not better ones, just different. I did not follow the details. I did not check public records or ask mutual acquaintances. Knowing how they landed was no longer my responsibility. That was part of the closure. The biggest change was not financial. It was internal. I stopped bracing myself when my phone rang. I stopped replaying conversations in my head, wondering if I had said too much or not enough. I stopped waking up already tired. One afternoon, Ava and I were sitting on the floor assembling a cheap bookshelf. The instructions were confusing, and we put one panel on backward. We laughed when we realized it. "That is okay," she said. "We can fix it." It struck me then how natural those words sounded coming from her. She did not say it like a defense. She said it like a fact. Later that week, she came home from school upset about a disagreement with a friend. She told me the story in fragments, pacing the kitchen while I listened. "I told her I did not like it," she said finally. "And she got mad." I waited, heart pounding in my chest, ready to reassure, to soften, to take responsibility. "And then what?" I asked. She shrugged. That was it. No apology for having feelings, no fear of consequences, just boundaries stated plainly. I realized then that this was the real revenge, if it could even be called that. Not watching anyone suffer, not winning an argument. It was breaking the pattern before it reached my child. The system that had relied on my silence no longer worked without it. That was the karma. Quiet. Practical. Unavoidable. I had not destroyed anything. I had simply stepped away. Some nights after Ava falls asleep, I sit on the small balcony with a cup of tea and listen to the sounds of the neighborhood. Cars passing, someone walking their dog. The low hum of ordinary life. I think about the woman I was before, the one who believed peace meant keeping everyone comfortable except herself. I do not hate her. She did the best she could with what she knew. But I do not miss her either. If you are listening to this and something in it feels familiar, I want to ask you something. What would change if you stopped holding up the system that is hurting you? What would happen if you chose calm over compliance and safety over approval? And if you are a parent, what are you teaching your child by the way you accept or refuse what is asked of you? I do not have a perfect ending, just a quiet one, and for the first time that feels like enough.